The shouting started before sunrise. Bootsteps pounded across frozen gravel. A metal gate slammed. Someone dropped a crate, wood splintered against stone. Inside the infirmary tent, a medic froze. Not because of the noise. Because of the number. More trucks. More silhouettes. More men than the camp had ever processed in a single morning. A guard's voice cracked through the cold air. Orders, confusion, paperwork flapping in the wind. No one had prepared for this. A stretcher brushed past the doorway, then another. But that wasn't the worst part. The registration desk was still set up for yesterday's count, ink barely dry on the ledger. Outside, engines kept running. What happened next made no sense. The convoy didn't stop. It kept coming. No one understood it yet, but the system that had taken months to stabilize was about to be pushed beyond its limit. And in the middle of it all stood one prisoner, a former logistics clerk, staring at a stack of empty forms. Why were they all arriving at once? It was late 1944, a German prisoner of war camp deep inside Allied-controlled territory. The war had shifted, front lines had collapsed faster than expected, entire units surrendered in clusters. But the camp had been designed for thousands, not waves. Karl Brenner had once organized railway shipments before the war. Now he tracked human arrivals with a dull pencil and a fading ruler. The first trucks unloaded without warning. No prior telegram. No advance notice. Just bodies stepping down into unfamiliar cold. And there was something odd. The supply manifest from the previous evening showed no increase in rations, no medical reinforcements, no expanded bedding allocation. Someone somewhere had miscalculated. But none of them knew what was about to happen. Before that morning, the camp had a rhythm. Wake-up whistle. Bread distribution. Medical check rotations. Inventory review before noon. Karl kept his pencil sharpened with the same pocket knife every day. He folded his sleeves twice evenly. He counted twice, sometimes 3 times. Routine meant survival. Across the yard, a POW medic named Ernst checked bandages, always lining them in pairs. Even numbers felt controlled, balanced. But that morning, his shelves felt lighter. One crate missing. He checked the corner twice. Nothing. Strange. At breakfast, whispers spread quietly. Maury coming. From the east. No, from the south. The guards looked uncertain too. That was new. And then the loudspeaker crackled with an instruction no one had heard before. All intake procedures expedited, no delays. Expedited. The camp ran on delays. Something was shifting. And the wind carried more engine noise from beyond the gates. The second wave arrived before noon. No bedding prepared. No barracks cleared. Paper forms stacked high on Karl's desk, edges curling. Rules changed mid-process. Medical checks shortened. Ration tickets temporarily handwritten. A whispered instruction passed from guard to guard. Just move them through. Move them where? Footsteps echoed across wooden planks. A storage door refused to lock properly. The kitchen fire burned hotter than usual, trying to stretch limited supplies. Wind pressed against canvas walls. Fabric trembled. Then came another anomaly. A list of expected arrivals didn't match the head count stepping off the trucks. Numbers off by dozens. Silence fell heavier than shouting. Something didn't align. A guard removed a notice board from the yard, no explanation. And then the routine broke completely. By mid-afternoon, the camp had absorbed more prisoners than it had in the previous month combined. Karl's pencil snapped. He didn't notice at first. Because the line in front of him wouldn't stop. Names, units, ages. Some couldn't remember their units. Some repeated the same information twice. Confusion layered over exhaustion. Ernst improvised triage stations outside. No dramatic injuries. Just fatigue, shock, hunger, cold. Too many at once. But that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was space. Barracks designed for 40 now held 65. Blankets redistributed. Storage rooms converted. An unused workshop cleared within hours. Orders came quickly now. Adjust. Recalculate. Condense. But one detail unsettled Carl. A sealed envelope delivered mid-chaos. Marked with the camp administrator's stamp. He wasn't authorized to open it. Yet the administrator never arrived that day. The envelope sat untouched on the desk as intake continued into the night. Engines finally quieted. But no one celebrated. Because the ledger showed something impossible. They had processed more men than official capacity allowed. And somehow the numbers still felt wrong. Morning returned quietly. Too quietly. The yard was fuller. Voices softer. Behavior altered. Guards counted more frequently. Carl rechecked his totals. Something didn't match. The sealed envelope remained unopened, but the administrator's office was locked from the inside. No response. Eventually, it was opened by a senior officer. Inside, a revised capacity directive dated weeks earlier. It had been delayed in transit. The records told a different story. This surge had been anticipated, just not communicated. But another detail lingered. The original supply request forms, filed days before, had never been approved. Accidental oversight. Or something else. Ernst noticed another change. His missing crate reappeared in a different storage shed. Unlabeled. Unaccounted for. No one admitted moving it. Relief spread slowly, the camp hadn't collapsed. But doubt settled deeper. Had they truly managed the impossible? Or simply survived a systemic failure? The surge had passed. The barracks were full but stable. The kitchen fires burned on schedule again. The yard returned to its predictable rhythm. But the questions did not. In the weeks that followed, 3 explanations quietly formed inside the camp. None of them felt complete. And none of them explained everything. According to the written report filed later that month, the sudden influx was the result of disrupted wartime logistics. Convoys had been rerouted after frontline collapses. Rail lines damaged. Telegraph systems overloaded. Communication slowed. On paper, it made sense. The document stated that multiple surrendering units were processed faster than expected, and holding camps were ordered to expand intake without delay. A delay in transmitting the revised capacity directive had caused confusion. Simple miscommunication. Administrative lag. But something didn't sit right. The revised capacity order found in the sealed envelope was dated 3 weeks earlier. 3 weeks. That meant someone, somewhere, knew the numbers would increase. And yet no food shipment was adjusted. No bedding requested. No staff reassigned. If the surge was anticipated, why wasn't the preparation? And why did the administrator not appear on the most critical day? The official explanation filled pages. But it left space between the lines. The rumor began quietly. Not shouted. Not written. Whispered between bunk rows after lights out. Some believed the camp had been intentionally tested. Higher command, uncertain of the stability of POW facilities under rapid intake pressure, may have withheld notice to observe real-time response. A stress test. No warning. No adjustments. Just impact. If the camp collapsed, it would reveal weakness. If it adapted, it proved resilience. It sounded plausible. The guards' tense expressions that morning, were they confusion, or were they waiting to see what would happen? Carl had noticed something subtle. One senior officer did not look surprised by the numbers. Concerned, yes, but not shocked, as if the arrival was early, not unexpected. Still, there was no documentation confirming such a plan. No memo, no follow-up evaluation, no commendation or reprimand afterward. And historically, other camps did not report identical tests under similar conditions. If it was intentional, why leave no trace? Rumors grow in silence. But silence can mean many things. The third possibility didn't come from paperwork or whispers. It came from behavior. Small, subtle changes. On the morning of the surge, the guards reorganized positions unusually fast. Faster than typical reaction speed. One gate that usually required 2 approvals opened immediately. And the intake ledger had fresh pages already inserted, something Carl normally prepared at night. Almost as if someone expected volume. But not that exact day. The timing seemed off, not the event itself. What if the surge was scheduled for later? And circumstances accelerated it. A frontline collapsed sooner than predicted. A convoy departure moved ahead of schedule. A transport officer acting independently. That would explain the partial readiness. Prepared but incomplete. Anticipation without synchronization. It would also explain the administrator's absence. Perhaps he had traveled to coordinate expansion, unaware the surge would occur before final confirmations. But that raises another question. If preparation had begun quietly, why were supply approvals still unsigned? Why was the medical crate temporarily misplaced? Why were some guards visibly confused, while others seemed alert? The behavior pattern suggests expectation. The paperwork suggests delay. The rumors suggest intent. None align perfectly. If it was simple miscommunication, why was there prior documentation? If it was a deliberate test, why no record of evaluation? If it was accelerated scheduling, why no emergency follow-up afterward? Even months later, minor inconsistencies remained in archived reports. Numbers rounded differently. Dates overwritten. Signatures slightly mismatched in ink tone. Small things. But in systems built on precision, small things matter. And here is what makes this moment powerful. The camp did not collapse. It adapted. It stretched rules. Condensed space. Rewrote procedure in real time. The surge became a story of resilience. But the reason behind it remains layered. Official logic. Unofficial suspicion. Behavioral evidence. Which explanation makes sense to you? Was it chaos, control, or something in between? Because sometimes the most revealing detail isn't what happened. It's what was never fully explained. The gravel yard looked smaller after that day. Not physically, but psychologically. Men who had once walked casually now glanced toward the outer gates whenever engines sounded in the distance. Even months later, Carl noticed it first in himself. Every time he sharpened his pencil, he paused. Just for a second. Listening, as if expecting shouting before sunrise again. Routine had returned. Wake-up whistle. Bread distribution. Medical checks. Inventory. But routine no longer felt permanent. It felt temporary. Earned. Fragile. Ernst reorganized the infirmary twice in the weeks that followed. He labeled shelves more carefully, counted supplies more often. He kept one emergency kit near the door, just in case. He never said why. He didn't need to. The camp had survived the impossible, absorbing thousands without collapsing into disorder. But survival changes people. Guards became quicker with adjustments. Clerks double-checked directives before nightfall. Medical teams practiced intake drills quietly on slow afternoons. Preparation became instinct. Because they understood something now. It wasn't the numbers that nearly overwhelmed them. It was the lack of warning. The uncertainty. The moment when no one knew if the system would hold. Weeks later, a final administrative summary was filed. Short, clinical, detached. It recorded the intake totals, the revised capacity, the procedural adjustments implemented afterward. Nowhere in that report did it describe the sound of boots running across frozen gravel, or the way hands shook while stamping forms too quickly, or the silence that fell when the head count briefly didn't match. History often records outcomes. It rarely records atmosphere. The sealed envelope was archived properly. The missing supply crate permanently reassigned. The administrator eventually resumed regular appearances, though he never publicly addressed his absence that morning. No inquiry followed. No official reprimand. No commendation either. Just quiet normalization. And that might be the most telling detail of all. Because when systems fail loudly, investigations begin. But when systems almost fail and recover, they are often left alone. The camp operated more efficiently afterward. Stronger on paper. Better prepared. Yet something intangible had shifted. Trust in routine had been replaced with awareness of vulnerability. And perhaps that awareness was the real turning point. Years later, survivors would describe that period not as the day chaos arrived, but as the day certainty disappeared. The engines eventually stopped coming in waves. The yard returned to ordinary movement. The wind still brushed against canvas walls. Footsteps still crossed the gravel at dawn. But those who were there never heard those sounds the same way again. Because they remembered the morning when the trucks didn't stop. When paperwork failed to keep pace with reality. When thousands needed help at once. The gravel is quiet now. The gate stands still. But if you listen closely, you can almost hear the echo of that first shout before sunrise. And the question that followed it. Were they prepared? Or simply fortunate?